A lot of my work is helping those manufacturers and services give a little empathy to their clients and really think about what they care about and making sure that their messaging reflects that. If you're going to catch the attention of the people who you're ultimately selling to, it really has to start with where they're at and not where you're at.
Welcome to Below the Surface. I'm Paul Balsam. Before I became a fractional CMO in the water industry, I spent over a decade owning and running a water tech company. That experience is the reason I started the show, to have the kinds of conversations I'd wish I had access to when I was in the seat. This is the podcast for water industry professionals who want to think differently about how this industry grows, communicates, and competes. If that's you, you're in the right place. My guest today is one of maybe a handful of people in North America who has built an entire copywriting business around the water industry. Andrew Dugan runs Water Rights out of Denver. He's an engineer by training, a writer by trade, and the person a lot of water marketers call when they need to talk to someone who actually understands the industry and their business. Join me in welcoming Andrew Dugan today on the podcast. Andrew, welcome to the Below the Surface podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, just tell me who you are and what you do, and kind of the quick and dirty of what got you here.
Sure. Yeah, long story short, I started my career as a manufacturer's representative here in Colorado. I worked for 3 years running around to wastewater treatment plants in Colorado and Wyoming, representing all the different manufacturers in our space and trying to make sales. And after 3 years of that, I decided to use my engineering degree and get into consulting and did that for a couple years. But if I'm being honest, I didn't particularly love it. And so I one day took a really intensive personality career test, and the results came back and said, well, Andrew, you should be a journalist. You should be a teacher. You should be a copywriter. And I said, well, what's that? And learned and came to find out that you can get paid to write for a living. And so that was the initiating moment of me becoming or starting Water Rights, my copywriting business, and helping all those manufacturers that I used to represent in my early days create marketing copy that they need. So, I mean, that's case studies, getting them into publications and magazines, writing white papers, and even something as small as a tagline for a business. And it's taken me a lot of different places. I've helped, marketing agencies. I've done a bunch of ghostwriting for publications, as well as directly with manufacturers, and gotten to do a lot of really cool creative work here in water. And so, yeah, that's the skinny.
Wow. You answered my first question was, how does an engineer turn into a copywriter / journalist? But here you are. What made you take that, the results of those tests, and niche down so far as to just stay in the water industry? I could see B2B technical, engineering type copy, and then you niche down even further.
I was already in water. And when I got the results from that test and copywriting really caught my attention, I was thinking about leaving the industry in general. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to see where this takes me. And really quickly, I found that there was a huge demand for people who, one, had the technical background of an engineer, understood water and wastewater, a lot of which I learned from my manufacturer's rep days of going to 300 wastewater plants and actually getting my certification in water and wastewater plant operations. And I just had this very unique mix from my previous jobs that even though I tried to branch out, very quickly the water industry pulled me back in because there was just this huge demand for people who understood the industry, could talk to the engineers, could talk to the technical folks at the manufacturers, could interview the operators using the equipment and create stories around it and create, marketing that really did resonate and read really well. And so, yeah, water is something that I've always been really passionate about. I've held a variety of roles in the industry, but the one thing that's been very consistent is I'm just very passionate about water and wastewater. And so I think that's why I didn't end up broadening very much in the beginning, is because it's where I wanted to be.
The thing I learned about niching down when starting my CMO practice is that it kind of defies logic. You know, when you talk to other people, they go, well, that seems way too small. Why don't you just do B2B, or why don't you do B2B SaaS, or whatever? What has niching down this far taught you, and what would you tell somebody who's at that stage of their business?
Yeah, you hit a good point where like niching can feel like you're limiting yourself, right? You're really limiting how many people you can work with, and the broader you are, the more opportunities you have. I could go all day about the niche thing because I've learned a lot from being a niche, and I think the biggest advantage has been it really defines you and your service. When you can really speak the language to that specific sector that you've chosen, it resonates with them a lot more than someone who is a jack of all trades or, hey, I'll do it, you know. And I think the biggest advantage I bring like to my clients is the fact that they don't have to explain the industry or they met me at a trade show and they met me in person. They know I'm real, you know. I think the niche has been also really, frankly, like from a business standpoint, niching down has enabled me to charge more from the beginning. The biggest value that I bring is my engineering degree. Not that I'm the best writer in the world. I am good at writing, but the value that I bring when I come in is that we can very quickly, I understand what it is they're doing, how it fits into this larger ecosystem. They don't have to teach me anything. It can create something for them. And that's where the value is, right? Not just someone who can write, but someone who can make it easy. And so again, it, it enables you to charge a lot more, a lot quicker. And it gives you a personality. It gives you branding that's easy to remember. And I think you kind of touched on what would I tell someone, who's niching down. I think it could be really easy to confuse what a niche is. And I've continued to play with defining what my niche is because it can be limiting, frankly. And water is kind of small. Being only in water is kind of limiting in a sense. And so I don't know how to explain it, but when looking for a niche, or if I were to give someone advice on a niche, I'd really look at a through line that you can understand. I have a friend who does excavation marketing. Now, excavation touches everything, right? You could be digging up septic systems, you could be doing water lines, you could be doing things not related to water and wastewater at all. It's a through line that touches a lot of different industries and a lot of different spaces. And so I would say for anyone who's like looking for a niche or wants to find a niche that's specific yet gives them a lot of opportunities, you got to take time to really think of what that through line is and why it's beneficial for those people to work with you.
Just touching on that really quick, the thing I see
Mm,
from the CMO side with niching down is like my niche pre-establishes credibility.
yes.
You know, like half of the conversation is already done before we start
Mm,
it. You're a marketing guy that only services water businesses. Okay, like you've already made it halfway into the door, and now we can have a conversation and bypass what do you do, who's your competition, who do you sell to, all those sorts of things, and just really get to the problems that we want to solve.
yeah.
So I really like it for that reason. Like it also, just on my side, it reduces context switching. You know, if you were working with like a guitar company and a water business and something totally different, I mean, it would
Yeah.
just kind of scramble your brain.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to juggle all of that if I had an automotive company, and, a handyman
Yeah,
and a water. Yeah, no, it would be. I probably wouldn't give my best to any of them. So it
exactly.
helps. I think another thing is for people like us, really having you're really picking up on the pulse of the industry is part of how we bring a lot of value. And when you are a generalist, you just don't have the time to go deep with the context. And I'm able to serve a lot of my clients a lot better because my whole LinkedIn feed is water and wastewater news, right? I'm keeping up with regulations that are impacting things. And I'm able to, when we're working on projects, say, well, hey, have you considered this that's coming up? Or do we want to mention XYZ? And that's something a generalist just probably can't deliver because they don't have the capacity to go deep with the subject.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Similar to that, I've heard you in the past say that your job is to like translate technical products, functions, speech, and jargon into stories.
Hmm.
Walk me through that translation process.
Yeah.
Even being an engineer, like I would think a lot of things probably you understand that I don't, not being an engineer. So walk me through that translation process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things you see a lot in marketing in water is how technical forward a lot of the messaging is. You'll see the slides,
Yep.
in the sessions, and some of these slideshows are just graphs on graphs, and they're hard to read, hard to understand when you're sitting in the crowd, or the case studies you read will be very product forward and very technical and very verbose on how things work. And a lot of my work when I'm interviewing the operators using the products, when I'm talking to the engineers who develop and support them, or, it's about humanizing and finding the emotional aspect of what these products do for the people who use them. And so that translation is, well, yeah, tell me how it works. Let's read the brochure. Let's read the technical data sheet. Let's talk about how it works. And then let's go a step further and say, how does it work for the people who are using it? And then what is the problem it's solving for your customers? Are they saving time? Are they saving money? Is it helpful for their wastewater treatment process or water? Is it it's solving a labor challenge. What does this look like? Or really, a lot of my work is helping those manufacturers and services give a little empathy to their clients and really think about what they care about and making sure that their messaging reflects that. So, the title isn't, the XYZ 5000 solves this problem. And instead we say, this city fixed this problem they had. And then we can go into the product. If you're going to catch the attention of the people who you're ultimately selling to, it really has to start with where they're at and not where you're at. That's one of the biggest things I help companies with is that empathy aspect with their messaging.
Human stories is what I'm
Hmm.
hearing.
Hmm.
Engineering secondary, which is probably counterintuitive to a lot of the businesses or founders that you work with. How does that kind of push and pull work?
Question. Some people don't always take my advice, and that's their prerogative. I Some people, they're on board. It really depends on the culture of the company, and that is case by case. Some people, they get it immediately. It becomes very clear that, yeah, we do need to be talking about their problems, and then we'll talk about us later. But to your point, some founders are just very technical people. We all live in our own bubble, but they're thinking about their products, and that's, what they care about. And I don't know, sometimes I lose those battles, Paul, and the revisions come back and they want it to be product forward, and at a certain point I have to let them do what they're gonna do,
Yeah.
but I really do try to help them see why that messaging works better, from previous clients or just from talking with their marketing team and really helping them advocate for themselves as to why that shift needs to happen.
What makes a good case study from a bad one?
It's a lot of the elements I've been alluding to. Again, a lot of case studies you'll read, and I do a lot of case studies in this industry. A lot of the case studies you'll see are, again, so product forward. You'll have the product name 5, 6, 7 times listed in a 500-word case study. You'll have it in the title. What makes a really good case study, again, it comes back to who's the reader? Who's the person reading it and where are they at and what do they care about? And leading with the client's objectives and leading with their KPIs. And so it's a title that mentions a city so that they can see themselves in the story. It's a title or, an opening that really talks about the challenges that these utilities are facing. Again, whether it's budget shortfalls, whether it's labor, whether it's really restrictive regulations coming in. It's really client foot heavy in the beginning, and then you talk about yourself second. And then in the end, you talk about the results that solution delivered to the client. And so you start with the client, you end with the client, and you get to talk about yourself in the middle, kind of like a sandwich. Bad case study, like I said, typically is very short on the challenges, doesn't do very much to really talk about what it is the client was going through to need the solution in the first place, skips over and then is super verbose about here's how it works and here's why we're so smart and why we're the best and onward.
Yeah, I think that's all really good. I'm thinking back to writing case studies for my water tech business, and I do think talking about the client's problems, like what issues are they trying to solve? What were their pain points? Like put the reader in the seat. And then ultimately it's just about how your business helped them.
Yeah.
And it
I
could
I
be
think
like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think some people overcomplicate it. If you look at it, all a case study should be is challenge, solution, results. And these templates are really simple. And I think anybody, if you want to write this stuff in house, just start it with that. Create three buckets of challenge, solution, results. And as you're doing your research and you're going through the notes from the project, just placing those in the pertinent buckets and then trying to write it automatically, just by creating that foundation, that structure, makes your case studies that much better. It's really simple, but I think some people try to reinvent the wheel or will kind of go off script, and that's when some of these case studies can get a little ugly from what I've seen.
No, that's great advice. Let's say I am a marketing director listening to this episode.
Yeah.
I work at a mid-sized water equipment company. I have a small team. I don't have a robust content calendar or anything like that, and the CEO keeps asking me about leads.
Mm.
Like what are the two or three things that you would encourage me to do in the short term? Maybe not to make this quarter, but to set myself up for success.
It's kind of a tough question. I mean, the first thing I would do is really look at what their current activities are. Are they going to the trade shows and which ones? How are they showing up at those trade shows? Because those live events are huge for our industry. I think those conferences, this B2B work, it is so interpersonal and relationships are everything. You hear it all the time too, is this is a relationships business. And it's true. So, I mean, I think first and foremost is how are we connecting with people in person is huge in terms of scaring up leads. I think looking at the list, whether it's a cold outreach list or something of that nature, and really trying to determine whether you really know who all your potential prospects are, right? And really qualifying them too. It can be easy to say, well, we'll sell to any water plant or any wastewater plant. And the truth is, not all products in our industry fit every scale of plant, right? You have some plants that are 100,000 gallons a day, water or wastewater, and then you have the Chicagos of the world and, the Denver metros of the world. And chances are, there's some solutions that can fit all of those, but usually not. And so really getting a sense of who is our target audience based on size and geography, that's huge. And then maybe thirdly is coming up with a multi-channel plan of how are we emailing? Are we calling people? I think phone calls is one of the things that maybe not enough companies do is that cold calling and not being aggressive about it, but introducing yourself over the phone because email is not always the best way to reach people at utilities. It's just not. These folks are running around, they're out in the field, and leaving a voicemail is usually more impactful and just more personalized. Yeah, how are we showing up digitally? How are we showing up over the phone and those trade shows? So hopefully that answered your question.
No, that's great. What you said there on that second point really does go back to our discussion about niching down.
Mhm.
The more targeted
Yeah.
your prospective buyer is, and you're writing copy for that exact person. You've got an
Yes.
image in your head of who that person is. You're going to address their problems more clearly, as opposed to saying we can do pretty much anything for anybody who needs a pump.
Yes.
You know,
It helps so
yeah.
much with the messaging. Absolutely. When you can really, again, I think some people, to your point, I think some people get really concerned about disqualifying potential leads, but I think it is really important to be very honest about what section of this world do we actually serve. And I've come across some companies who are very good about we serve mid-sized people. We can't serve the big boys and we're too complicated for the small guys. We work with people who process tens of millions of gallons a day, and that's who we do. And any more, any less, it just doesn't fit. It does help so much with messaging because then you know exactly the type of structure that they're going to have at that facility. You know exactly the org chart. You can get a pretty good idea. You can make messaging that really fits the problems that specifically those people are having. The sharper that messaging is, the better your marketing's going to hit, the more, leads you're going to scare up because specificity, like in copywriting, is key. I'm too specific. And people think my messaging is a little weird, which is fine. We go back and forth, but the more specific, the more personalized, the more you're going to resonate and actually strike a chord with people and get them interested in what it is you offer.
Yeah, we've all felt that feeling where you're reading something and you're like, or you're watching something or what have you, where you're thinking, they're talking to me.
Yes,
And it resonates so much deeper, feels so much truer, and you feel more touched by that.
absolutely. Well, and I work with some companies too where, well, hey, Andrew, we do sell certain things to the, let's say, the big boys, and then we have some products that are really more for that mid or smaller size facility. And well, hey, let's still define that and like what that is, because we'll probably need different campaigns so that we can still be specific and sell what it is, or maybe it's one product, but different aspects of it resonate differently for those different types
Yeah.
of facilities. And hey, let's make multiple campaigns so that we're really creating good messaging for each section that we serve.
Okay, let's pivot slightly to talk about
Sure.
current trends and maybe even the future.
Okay.
You are seeing inside of a lot of water businesses right now. What's actually changing in how businesses in this industry market? Not like the LinkedIn trend version, but what's the version you're living?
What's actually, yeah, inside. It's such a mixed bag, Paul. I know you said not LinkedIn, but frankly, I've unfortunately been seeing a lot of people in marketing in our industry get laid off. I've been seeing a lot of in-house folks and have been losing some contacts at some of these companies. I think maybe because of AI, I think that's an undeniable trend. Is there's a number of companies who are investing in automating their marketing, which, I think has mixed results and it depends on how you deploy it. I won't say it's good or bad. But I mean, another trend is we're also, and this kind of goes counter to the, the other thing I just said, but we're also seeing people invest in it tremendously. I think
Sure.
it's such a mixed bag of people wanting to either way, everyone's changing it up. They're either investing and going all in and really trying to figure out how are we making an impact and getting embedded into these organizations. And there's also people, and then how do we also do that with the new tools that are out and coming out every day? And so I think a lot of people are rethinking how it's done. We're seeing finally in this industry print sort of dying away and more digital marketing, because I think we're seeing more millennials and even Gen Z step into leadership roles and they just buy differently. We're finally seeing the old guard sort of pass on, and as these younger leaders step up, they're just different and they're buying differently, and it forces a new game plan for all of these companies. So how are we going to stay relevant and keep catching the attention of these people that are stepping up and taking on these roles?
Well, you brought up AI, so we got to talk AI a little bit, and
I guess so.
especially as a copywriter
Mm,
for businesses in our industry, where is it useful? Where is it actively making things worse? I've heard you talk about this generally speaking, especially with your LinkedIn's of the world looking like their new algorithm updates are really policing AI slop.
yeah,
What are your thoughts on it?
my relationship with AI is kind of complicated because I think it has definitely been eating my lunch a little bit these past few years. When I first started out, I was crazy busy with writing blogs for companies because they needed it for SEO. But once, the keyword building was fully, something you can automate with ChatGPT, it killed the blog aspect of my business. And what has kept me going is more long form, things that are a little harder to just generate and deploy. Whereas sort of those shorter form things, like say social media, blogs for the website, that stuff seems to, from what I can tell, that's where people have really been automating. Whereas, like coming down to case studies, you could probably use AI for case studies. I know I use a lot of these transcriptions for capturing my conversations with operators, with technical folks. But case studies are kind of tough because you really have to have that conversation with those people, right? That's one thing that I'm sure they're working on it, but that can't quite be automated yet, is really talking to the people using and creating those products and capturing why those things were helpful for their work. And so yeah, AI came out, or ChatGPT 4 came out 6 months into me leaving engineering and becoming a copywriter, and things were chugging along, and then boom, and I was like, uh-oh, what have I done? And stay busy regardless. I think a lot of people in water know that this is a very specific jargon and language that you have to speak with in order to be authentic and seen as, authoritative, that at least not yet Claude or ChatGPT or any of those large language models just can't quite get. And I say that because they keep coming back to me. And I think if
Yeah.
they could nail it, my phone would stop ringing. And so that's where I think it kind of starts and stops at this point. Is it's really good with SEO, chat, or large language models. It seems to be very helpful with that aspect of marketing. But this is a personal business. It is so interpersonal, and you can't automate relationships. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, and this industry being as relationship heavy as it is. I think people are going to want the personal connection for a long time.
Yeah. I think you're seeing a lot of people react against AI too, because I know personally, I don't love seeing the AI slop that's on any of my social media feeds, or you can really tell if something's inauthentic, and it is creating this I won't say counterculture, but just this counter reaction of people wanting authenticity now more than ever because there is so much high quality fake stuff. And, I think there's been this sort of this pushing away from AI and wanting that authenticity. It's become more and more valuable because it is so easy to fake some of these things that we've been doing online for the last decade or so.
Do you think AI actually does a good job?
Hey, I don't really want to point to AI because I think it depends on the person using it, right? AI is a
Sure,
tool. I think
sure.
I think that I think AI gets seen as an easy button. And when people just want things to be fast and easy just for the sake of being fast and easy, it comes off as that, as fast food, as, just sort of all calories and no nutrients in the messaging that you
Sure.
create. I think AI undeniably is a really powerful thing that if, yeah, maybe this is cliche, but if you really bring that human input into AI, there's a lot of ways that it can speed things up, that it can scale the type of messaging that you're doing. And the other thing is it's here, right? We can't get around it. Your Google search has completely shifted because of AI. And I think there was even some even more recent Google search changes, but like these
Yeah.
AI overviews have completely changed how we look at things, or even these large language models have changed the language we use to search for things because it's no longer keywords, it's questions and then expecting answers. So I don't know. There's kind of an incomplete answer, but AI is going to be a part of marketing, whether I like it or not. But where it's useful and where it isn't, I think that remains to be seen. I don't think we've plateaued yet quite into how we can and can't use it. And I think it's still a dynamic situation where we don't quite know where the line is. It's been such a Wild West situation the past 3 years, and hopefully it'll settle down eventually, just so we know how to move forward as marketers.
Here's hoping. If there's a marketing person, a marketer at a water company, and you want them to take one thing from this conversation, what would you want that to be?
Humanize technology. I think, yeah, that's the drum I'm always beating, is how do we bring emotion into these really incredible products that we get to work with? I feel really fortunate to get to work with all these companies because they're doing so many cool things. They really are. But I think the biggest hurdle we face isn't a technical one. It's one of messaging. And it's one of buy-in, and it's culture. And that can only be shifted through storytelling. I really do feel that way, that, one of the reasons that we really need to be investing in marketing is that we really need to change how we talk about these technologies in order to shift decision making and increase adoption of some of these really cool tools, because these utilities need it. They really need it.
What is one question you wish someone would ask you on a podcast and no one's asked you yet?
That's kind of a tough one.
Yeah, you don't have to have an answer.
Yeah,
What's your favorite food?
my favorite food. I am a sucker for some green curry.
Okay.
Yeah,
As somebody with a pizza tattoo, that's always my answer.
pizza. I
Green
love
curry's nice
pizza.
too. Yeah.
I'll have to get a green curry tattoo.
Well, tell people where to find you, because I definitely
Sure.
want want people to be able to reach out to you if they need to.
Yeah, thank you. You can find me at Andrew Dugan on LinkedIn. It's just my name. LinkedIn's where I'm probably the most active in promoting, the work I do. I am also in the midst of transitioning from being a copywriter to starting a marketing agency within our industry to just increase what I can do for the people I'm already working with. Just provide more and, do deeper work with that. And so I am actually starting a new company. It's called the Products for Utilities Marketing Agency, or PUMA, and the website is runwithpuma.com. And so you can go to the Water Rights website and it'll redirect you to PUMA starting in June. So looking forward to that. And again, just redoubling my commitment to improving how we market in this industry.
Well, if you've got a water company that needs content that doesn't read like it's from the 90s, I think Andrew's your call. He's going to bring a human touch to it. And yeah, reach out to him in all of those ways. Andrew, thanks for jumping on the podcast today, and I had a really good time.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Absolutely.